Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Benny Becker. As you know, I am thrilled to be back sitting down here talking Orioles baseball with all of you. So excited to be back, gang. We had taken an off day on Thursday. You know, episodes come out every Monday and Thursday. Well, last Thursday, right when we were about to sit down to do the episode, we got some scary news, some breaking news, and we had to kind of take a step back. We wanted the news to kind of settle itself out. We wanted to figure out what really happened before we jumped on air and talked to you about it. Once we got into the weekend, it looked like we were a little clear out of the real scary stuff, but certainly injuries might still loom. That's something we will talk about soon, but we didn't want to jump on with any of that until we were certain with what was in front of us. So that's why we took the off day Thursday. But glad to be back here on a Monday talking Orioles baseball. Like I said, every Monday and Thursday we will have new episodes all throughout the season. A lot of good stuff coming on our social media pages too soon. So be sure to check us out at Talkin Orioles Baseball on TikTok, on Instagram, on X, and be sure to check in every Monday and Thursday for brand new episodes, gang. Very exciting stuff on this episode. Like I said, a little bit of injury scares to catch you up on. Obviously, some spring training games to kind of breeze through, but catch you up on anything good and bad that may have happened in those games. And we're going to be talking a lot about the pitching today. There's a lot of good pitching stories I want to kind of dig into. Some really good stats I think you guys are going to like. So we're going to be talking a lot of pitching on this episode. So let's just jump in, gang, and catch you up on the spring training games. Spring training game number 3 was against the Tigers. We won 8-7. Again, we're going to breeze through these games because, frankly, spring training games don't mean anything when it comes to the standings. Don't mean anything, really, when it comes to most of the stat lines. And already we've seen some of the guys we might mention get cut from the major league camp. Certainly, they're still with the team in the minor league camp. And that's something I think we're going to cover next, or this Thursday on our next episode. So, again, let's just dig into these games just a little bit. 8-7 win against the Tigers. Like I said, the big takeaways were a 2-run home run by Heston Kjerstad and Enrique Bradfield. Bradfield actually is one of those guys that did get sent to minor league camp, but certainly he was having an okay camp. Not unbelievable. He'd probably still be with the team if that was the case, but the 2-run home run was a great sign from Bradfield because that's a guy that you can project in the future, not only providing speed, defense, but also maybe a little bit of pop. Similar to maybe how Cedric Mullins' career has panned out. Had one, maybe arguably 2 big power years, but certainly on any given year should hit anywhere between 10 and 15 home runs, which from your speed outfielder, you'll take every single season. All right, so then some other good stuff. Gunnar went 1 for 3. Adley 1 for 2. Jackson 1 for 2. Tyler O'Neill drew 2 walks. Ramon Urias went 1 for 2. And Daz Cameron continues to be hot this camp and maybe push for a spot that, like we talked about, might not even be there. But certainly he's doing everything he can to find himself on a major league roster, even if it's not for the Orioles. 2 for 2 with 2 RBIs in that game. The biggest note, though, from that game was Charlie Morton's first spring start with the Orioles. Only an inning pitch. Didn't want to, obviously, have him do too much out there. You got to loosen up the arms. You got to lengthen them out throughout camp. So certainly we'll see more than an inning probably in his next start. But 1 inning, and it was decent. 2 hits given up. No Ks, no walks, but also no runs. So, hey, you'll take that. Listen, Charlie Morton is a finesse pitcher and certainly isn't going to get frazzled by a couple base knocks against him in an inning. Again, spring doesn't really matter too much. You just want these guys to kind of get their timing back, their rhythm back, and kind of get into the feel of the game more than really putting positive production in the game first, if that makes sense. All right, Dean Kramer actually followed Charlie Morton. Usually, obviously, Dean's pegged right now as our number 5 starter, but sometimes you see these teams do that, kind of back up 2 real starters back-to-back in a game. Kramer went 2 innings. Wasn't his best outing. 3 hits, 2 walks, 3 Ks, though. Good to see. 2 earned runs, one of which off a home run. Both innings were a bit tough, but for different reasons. Again, it's early into spring, and the stats don't necessarily matter, but the process does, frankly. The process is one of the things that matter the most when it comes to spring training. So again, his innings were not great, but for different reasons. So in the first, he gave up a single and then a home run that counted for both those earned runs, actually. I was mistaken a second ago. In the second inning, he gave up 2 walks and a single, but came out of it without giving up any runs. So obviously, guys were getting on and hitting the ball in that start for Dean Kramer. But I think in a little bit, we're going to follow it up with another Dean Kramer start that's a little bit better and maybe eases that worrisome, it wasn't a start, but appearance. All right. Sir Anthony Dominguez pitched an inning, gave up 2 hits, a walk, got 1 K, but gave up 2 earned on a home run. Gregory Soto, Cionel Perez, and Keegan Aiken then pitched consecutively the next 3 innings. Our big 3 lefties in the pen, like we've talked about, at least what we're projecting is our big 3 lefties in the pen come the start of this season. And Soto and Perez struggled. Soto, an inning pitched, 3 hits, 2 Ks, 2 earned. You love to see the Ks, but the rest of it, not that great. Cionel Perez, 1 inning, 2 hits, 1 earned run. Not the best inning. But then Keegan Aiken followed it up with a very good inning. 1 inning pitch, 1 K, no hit, no walk, no run. Love seeing it. And we talked last episode, or we're going to talk this episode, about how Keegan Aiken is maybe the key lefty in the pen. Excuse me. Sometimes the mind gets a little wonky on what we talked about last episode compared to what we're going to talk about this episode. But it's coming your way a little later this episode, all right? Then Cano and Baker each pitched an inning, each got a K, each gave up no hits, no walks, and no runs. So you love seeing it. Brian Baker is certainly a guy that, while we're not projecting makes the team, certainly is in contention, if nothing more, for that last spot. And a guy that I think could make a big impact in the Orioles bullpen this season. Next game was a 7-3 loss against the Pirates. Not much to report here. No Orioles got multiple hits. You had Gary Sanchez, Colin Cowser. Sanchez 1 for 3. Cowser 1 for 2 with a walk. Carlson 1 for 2 with a walk and an RBI. Emmanuel Rivera 1 for 3, making a push maybe for the roster. And Sam Pizarro got an RBI sac fly. Some bad stats, too, from that game, frankly. Jackson Holliday 0 for 2 with a K. Mountie 0 for 3 with a K. Kobe Mayo 0 for 3 with 2 Ks. And Heston Kjerstad 0 for 3 with 3 Ks. Certainly was not a great showing from any of those guys, but the main point of that game to take away was Tomo Sugano making his first start for the Orioles. They pitched him 2 innings. He gave up 2 hits, 1 walk, no Ks, no runs. Certainly, listen, that's a stat line that we will take from Tomo every 2 innings out. It really is. And I think that we might be seeing that, obviously, with more innings in it come the season, but that might be a pretty familiar stat line. Not many strikeouts, but not really going to walk guys. Guys that are going to get on, are going to be hits. But he's a veteran who should be able to mitigate the damage when guys do get on. So great showing from Tomo. Absolutely love that. We have more to come from him soon. Andrew Kittredge, one of the new men in the bullpen. Good, but not great outing. An inning pitch, 2 hits, 1 walk, so guys got on. 2 Ks, no runs, though. Really worked himself out of the jam. And then Randolfo Martinez, who we've talked a couple times about. Another kind of tough outing for Rodolfo. 1 inning pitch, 2 hits, 2 earns, no walks, no Ks. Next game was an 11-8 win against the Blue Jays. Really, 3 home runs took the show that day. Ramon Urias, who's doing everything he can in this camp to keep his spot on the roster. Tyler O'Neill, one of the big bring-ins, especially on the offensive side. Love seeing it. Home run for him as well. And Sam Basallo, a home run that was extremely deep to right center. Even made it onto one of the backfields behind the stadium. Unbelievable. Gray Rod also got the start. 1 2/3 innings for him. No walks, no hits, no runs, 2 Ks. Very nice stat line from Gray Rod, who we're talking about taking that next step to be the ace. Fill the shoes of Corbin Burnes. And frankly, everything we've seen and heard from Grayson Rodriguez so far this spring is showing me and convincing me that's going to be the case. So all I'm saying. Next game was a thrilling 13-10 win against the Twins. And I'm saying thrilling because the Orioles put up real Orioles magic. 8 runs in the 9th inning. Our buddy JR was down there to watch it personally. He was texting us updates throughout it, talking about a massive home run that one of these guys, I believe, Jeremiah Jackson, hit in that 9th inning. Holliday and Beavers also homered. Great to see. Holliday actually went 2 for 3. Kowser 1 for 3. Heston 1 for 3. Fabian and Beavers each 1 for 2 with 2 RBIs apiece. Gotta love seeing that, even though both of them are actually part of those cuts that recently happened as well, that claimed Bradfield as well, getting him out of Major League camp, but back in minor league camp. Don't forget those names, especially Dylan Beavers. I think both of them are going to be pieces for us down the line, if not this season. Zach Eflin got the start, 2 innings pitched, 4 hits, no walks, 1 K, 1 run. Nice little appearance for Zach Eflin on that day. Albert Suarez followed it up with not so great of an appearance. 2 2/3 innings pitched, giving up 5 earned runs. His ERA in spring at the moment is 14.54. 14.54. Albert has not really shown up this camp, but again, it's not all results oriented. Sometimes what they're seeing on the backfields and in the bullpens is more than enough to secure the spot that Albert Suarez is at least the front runner for. Cionel Perez and Yennier Cano each pitched an inning, gave up 1 hit, 1 earned run. Listen, again, it's spring training, gang. I'm not getting too worried. I'm not getting too upset. But certainly, when you see Perez and Cano struggling, it's not the best signs either. Now, the next game was a 5-2 loss to the Pirates, where the Orioles had to go against Paul Skeens, who pitched the first 3 innings. They got a run off of him, so fairly successful. Did strike out 4 times, I believe. But ultimately, it's Paul Skeens, gang. And we're really not going to see him in the regular season. Once, maybe twice. So it's just one of these things where, what can you do? End up losing the game 5-2, like I said. Really not much to report on that game. Adley went 1 for 3. Mountie 1 for 3. Urias 1 for 3. So that was about it, gang. Not that fun of a game to see. And then the next one yesterday was a 5-4 loss against the Phillies. Also not that thrilling of a game. Key notes are Holliday 1 for 3, Laureano 1 for 2 with a walk, Kowser 1 for 3 as well, and Basallo 1 for 2 to kind of continue his hot spring. And while there might not be room for him, make the best push he can to break camp with this team. Dean Kramer really is the biggest note from that. We talked about his bad appearance, his first time out. This time, he got the start. He pitched 3 innings, only gave up 1 hit, 1 walk, 2 Ks, and no runs. Absolutely phenomenal stuff from Dean Kramer in that game. So that catches us up on the spring training games. Now, we get to the important news. We get to the things that really prevented us from doing the episode last Thursday. because we needed to see what was going on with these two. In spring training, we're afforded the luxury of, again, the game's not really mattering. The storylines kind of being more behind the scenes and investigatory, digging into analytics, more than, again, talking about real games and real situations. So we had 2 injury scares in the past week. Really scary, considering who it happened to. The first was Jordan Westburg, who popped up out of nowhere dealing with a back injury. So at this point, everything seems all right. It was, hopefully a small injury when it occurred. And now he's already resumed light baseball activities. He did that 2 days ago. Yesterday, he began hitting progression. So he's expected back in a few days. And listen, a little strain or sprain in your back, a little tweak in your back in the beginning of spring training is certainly not the worst thing in the world. The bigger one, as far as player profile goes, was Gunnar Henderson, who left the Jays game in the first inning with lower right side discomfort. That was the exact quote. Lower right side discomfort. And that left me and all of Birdland wondering, what does that mean? What is the extent of that? Even though at the time Hyde said it was simply precautionary, and being that it was a spring training game in February, they just took him out of the game. Had it been even a spring training game in middle to late March, they may have kept him in the game, let alone an actual regular season game. So he hasn't played since, but they didn't even need an MRI on it. It was very, very positive. Them going, we don't even need to look into this. He kind of did it while he was diving after a catch, I believe, against Bo Bichette. And, you know, these things happen. You get a little bruise, especially in the beginning of camp. You haven't really experienced too much of that in the past few months. Even though for MLB The Show promos, I saw Gunnar diving across stuff. So maybe, you know, bruised it a little there and now it popped up there. I don't expect anything negative. In fact, he might even return today. If not, he should return in the next few days. From what I'm told, it's still sore, but it's improving since it occurred. Guys, it was a panic. I mean, all you got to do is look at the Talkin Orioles Baseball X account and see my first response was, oh, God, no. Dear God, no. Tell me it ain't so, Gunnar. Making comments to Rock Kubiak and all types of guys. It was one of these things, again, that was very scary in the moment, but you needed to figure out what was happening before I actually discussed it. Frankly, I didn't want to come on here in full-blown panic mode and set Oriole Nation ablaze with worry. So thankfully, it seems like we're out of the woods almost essentially when it comes to those two guys. And we've talked about how spring training isn't that important as far as the game results or even the individual player results. And it's about the process. Well, the number one thing that every team, especially a team as good as the Orioles, with as much expectations this season as the Orioles, the number one thing you want out of spring training is health. The last thing you want is leaving spring training already banged up and dinged up. Now, it's different when you're talking a Jorge Mateo situation, a guy that's rehabbing off of an injury last year, who actually gives you a little more roster flexibility if he starts the season on the IL, even if maybe he doesn't have to. But having a Gunnar Henderson, having a Jordan Westburg fall early and have a serious injury, that just is not how you want to start your season or need to start your season. And frankly, you know how these things work. These guys can be gone in a snap and their season could be done. So thankfully, that is not the case. And we made it out of the woods, hopefully, in the clear. And don't forget last year, on one last note about it, how Gunnar Henderson had the oblique injury. It's something on my X I was bringing up and making note of is how Gunnar had this oblique injury he suffered, and it wasn't bad enough that he couldn't play, and it wasn't bad enough that they were truly worried about it, but certainly it was something that on this podcast we talked about the reality that, hey, maybe this is something that's going to linger with him for a month or two. And hey, maybe this is going to take, him some time to work through, and he might not start that hot. We all know that wasn't the case. Gunnar Henderson came out of the gate as one of the MVP candidates. So, frankly, I'm not too concerned about this, him or Westberg at the moment, or moving forward in a month once we are in real baseball games. All right, so the first topic outside of those that we're going to talk about is Tomoyuki Sugano. I cannot say that last name, gang. I cannot wait to watch televised games of him starting so I can actually hear how professionals say his name. Because Sugano, I think. But then my brain changes it all which ways and I can't do it properly. It's so tough. But anyway, we're going to talk about Sugano's first start. Tomo is the easiest way for me to say his name. Tomo. He had 28 pitches, 17 of them were for strikes. Like we said, pitched multiple innings in that appearance. Some of the quotes from Brandon Hyde are absolutely fantastic stuff to hear. He said, quote, just a ton of strikes. He had really good stuff. Command of his fastball well. Threw some really good split fingers. He's got elite command of multiple pitches. When he misses just off. Quote, it's fun to watch. It's also fun because of how many different pitches Tomo has in his arsenal. 6 pitches like we've talked about, and he threw all 6 of them. He threw 7 changeups, 6 cutters, 6 four-seam fastballs, 5 curves, 3 sinkers, and even 1 sweeper. It's exciting stuff because with elite control of all 6 pitches and movement, all which different ways, and different speeds, it's going to be very tough for Major League hitters to really hit him well. And that's good stuff for us, gang. We need Major League hitters to struggle hitting Tomo well. His four-seam fastball velocity averaged 92, maxed out at 93. So again, very consistent. I feel like maybe even that's something the Orioles are going to work with him on maybe having a little less consistency even, in the idea that you can go down to 91 and max out at 93. You can go down to 90 or 89 even. Like, mixing speeds is just as important sometimes as location and movement when it comes to pitching properly. One of the best things when you start reading stories about Tomo and his time so far in camp is how he's really working to build relationships with the catchers, whether it be Rushman or Sanchez, but having daily conversations with them and currently working on pitch sequencing. At the beginning, it was more just, hey, live pitch by pitch, essentially. I'm not thinking about what's going to come next. I'm not trying to figure that out, just pitch by pitch. But now he's already comfortable enough. Again, he's a longtime veteran of Japanese professional baseball. So it's just one of these things where he can catch on quickly. And already they're working on pitch sequencing and what pitches want to be thrown when and how you're going to throw one pitch and follow it up with another because it's got the same pitch tunnel and all of those things. And I'm sure Tomo's very familiar with that as well. But certainly in a new organization with new catchers and new coaches, they may have different ways to go about it. And certainly in a new league, there might be different ways that you have to go about it. You might be able to get away with some things in Japan that you can't get away with in America. And Tomo, frankly, has talked about that himself. Overall, he's just been showing his professionalism day in and day out, getting to work, doing the work that needs to be put in. I love this guy. I really am starting to feel very confident in Tomo's success this season. Am I saying he's going to be up there for Cy Young? Probably not. But am I confident that maybe he can pitch to a, 14-6 record with like an ERA of 3.6? Yeah. And frankly, I would take the heck out of that, gang. And I think he could even have better numbers than all of that. Don't forget how good Imanga was last year for the Cubs. Again, probably butchering that last name. Outside of Ichiro Suzuki, gang, my Japanese gets a little fishy. No pun intended. But overall, Tomo is going to have good, if not great success, I believe, this year for the Orioles. And just like we're about to talk about with Charlie Morton, I think that his veteran presence, even if it's not Major League Baseball veteran presence, he is one of the all-time great pitchers in Japan. He has a lot of knowledge to impart on these other players, and I think that's going to have a lasting impact, not only in their actual pitching, but just the way that they go about their business. Again, the professionalism, the way that they are all in, the way that they prepare for their starts. It can't have a negative effect. Truly, it cannot. Now on to Charlie Morton, the other older pitcher, one of the other signings for the Orioles this offseason. And Morton is salting his wisdom around the Orioles pitching staff, if you will. I love it. And frankly, it's no surprise because for a very long time now, Charlie Morton has been thought of as one of those veteran major league pitchers with a ton of knowledge to impart to younger and middle-aged pitchers trying to improve the career that they're having, trying to improve their stuff, their work ethic, their preparation, all of these things. He's been a great mentor for countless pitchers in this league. And the fact that we have him to, once again, salt his wisdom to our younger cores, younger guys, is a fantastic thing. Now, Morton, though, isn't looking to come in there and lecture anybody, as he says. Instead, he just looks to create relationships and really learn from each other, which is one of the things that I think makes his teammates love him so much, is that it's not like, hey, you need to listen to what I'm telling you. It's this guy that you know has a ton of knowledge that's useful to you. And meanwhile, he wants to learn stuff from you. He thinks that you have stuff to offer to him. And it's interesting. It's a great person that we have in this clubhouse. It's a great leader to have in this clubhouse. And it's a great way to go about making other people better from what you know, from your knowledge. Zach Eflin, who we know is going to be very important to the Orioles this year, raves about Morton's mentorship. They were once teammates a long time ago in Philly, and again, has nothing but good things to say. Quote, any chance you get to pick his brain about anything about his career is huge. There are so many things he does right, and so many people have said great things about Charlie throughout the years. Quote, he's loved throughout the game of baseball. Again, because he's not just trying to tell you what you need to do better. He's not trying to teach you everything. He's not trying to lecture you on anything. He's just trying to have a friendship, basically, and be there for you like you're there for him, and learn about you as a person like you're going to learn about him as a person. And in the process, yeah, you're going to talk pitching, and you're going to learn about pitching, and you're going to learn about work ethic and preparation. But it's more than that. It's a personal relationship, not just a professional relationship when it comes to Charlie Morton. Chase McDermott was talking to him during drills and in the weight room and said, quote, it's a great presence to have in the clubhouse. Now, Cade Povich actually got a bit of a scouting report on being teammates with Charlie Morton from his college teammate or his former college teammate in Nebraska, Spencer Schwellenbach, the stud young pitcher for the Braves, who was a teammate with Charlie Morton last year. And Povich had this to say. He said he knows so much and he's so wise when it comes to the pitching aspect of things. To have him is definitely going to be a cool kind of upside for our staff. Now, there's a few takeaways from that. One, he said our staff, which means Cade Povich is fully committed to being a part of this staff this season. That's one of the takeaways I took, which just shows you Cade Povich's confidence in himself this season, which is kind of what we've been hearing and talking about. But also, obviously, it's more about Charlie Morton, at least this segment is. And it's true. He knows so many things and he has so much knowledge on how to pitch effectively in this league. Again, it's just going to trickle down to these guys. And it's ultimately going to have an effect on these guys. Even just 1 year at Charlie Morton is going to have a major impact on these young pitchers. Not just for this season, gang, but for their careers. Which is a beautiful thing when you're talking about Povich and McDermott. And these younger players, Grayrod, these younger pitchers that could be the core of this Orioles rotation in the near future. And having them soak up all of that knowledge from Charlie Morton. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to replace an inning-eating ace, okay? Frankly, what can we learn from the Brewers last season? And I mean that in the sense that the Brewers obviously traded away Corbin Burnes to us. They traded away their ace. And they did quite successful last season. I was one of the people, like many, coming into the season last year that didn't really believe in the Brewers. Frankly, I had a few people. Our buddy JR, like we talked about, our buddy Ron, our buddy Neil. A lot of people were high on the Brewers last year, and I was not one of them. And mainly the reason I wasn't one of them is because I worried about how their pitching staff was going to perform after Corbin Burnes. Well, let me just tell you, the Brewers last year not only won their division, they had 93 wins, and the 5th best ERA in MLB baseball. So I'd say they did pretty well. And like the Brewers, the Orioles kind of find themselves, I feel like, in a similar rotation situation or construction. The rotation is similarly constructed, I feel like, to last year's Brewers, where you have some young, promising pitchers, including one possible ace. Now, the Brewers lost Woodruff, who was really the guy that I would have pegged to be that guy. But they found some good guys along the way, despite losing him. For us, it's Grayrod, obviously, is our possible ace, young pitcher. But there's just a mix of undervalued veteran pitchers with younger guys who maybe haven't lived up to their full potential yet. I think that's a nice way to say it. So how did the Brewers go about being successful last season with their pitching, despite not having Corbin Burnes? Well, before I get to the argument on things we can copy, I'll just get to the one part that I know we can't copy, which is the division, frankly. The Brewers are in a division with the Reds and the Pirates and some crappy hitting teams, right? Even the Cardinals last season were crappy. So that's part of it. You played a lot of games against teams who don't have good hitting, or really didn't have that good of teams in general. Okay, we can't copy that. One, we can't affect the other teams in our division like that. But also, clearly, we're in a very tough division. You have the Yankees and Sox and Jays and even the Rays, who probably stink this season, but are even tough and pesky in seasons they stink, and certainly have shown to have really good seasons in years nobody believed in them. So don't be surprised if out of nowhere the Rays are right back towards the top of this division in hunt to win it. It's just the reality, gang. We're in the AL East, but frankly, I wouldn't want it any other way. And we're not going to get off a topic for me going on a rant about the division and the possible realignments that multiple people have thrown out, but I don't really think will ever happen. Let's just get back on track on how to relate or how to replace basically the stats that we got from Corbin Burnes. Well, if you look at the Brewers last year, they used 16 pitchers who made starts last season for them. And you might be going, well, we probably used that much. We had a lot of pitching injuries, and we lost guys, and guys came back, and then we lost them again in Bradish and Means, and there were guys dropping at different times, whether Great Rod or whoever. So we must have had that many. No, we had 12. They had 16. Even with all the injuries last year, we only had 12, which isn't necessarily a negative, isn't necessarily a liability. Oh, you need more than 12 guys to start. But the point is using pitching depth can help the top options not only remain healthier, but more effective when they're out there. Utilizing the depth in your roster is great and is probably one of the keys to the Orioles this season as far as getting positive pitching from these guys. Now, certainly, we would love to keep all 5 guys in the rotation all year. That's not realistic. Even if it's just for a quick 1-game scratch or a 10-day IL stint. That's not real. Like, those things happen, and you need some guys to come in and replace other guys at times. And frankly, I know there's a low public perception and opinion on our staff right now. But I'm going to argue that the Orioles rotation is better than the Brewers rotation was this time last year, and certainly after they lost Woodruff. So the Orioles are in line to have a better pitching staff than the Brewers had last season with those numbers. Also, I could make the argument this Orioles staff this year is better than the Orioles staff last year with Corbin Burnes. Now, listen, we could debate on that. We could go into hard details, and I'm going to kind of leave it at this. And if you want to argue about it, bring it to the comments. But frankly, I'm much higher on this rotation at this point than a lot of people are. But that depth that we're going to need to utilize is going to come from the names of Cade Povich, Chase McDermott, Trevor Rogers when he gets healthy, Brendan Young, other guys as well. Obviously, we're hoping Bradish makes an appearance at some point and is able to stay in the rotation once he comes back, if he comes back. Probably a few other names, maybe an Albert Suarez takes a couple starts here and there. Again, now you're adding numbers. Now we're at 11, 12 again. Well, maybe we need to dig a little deeper into our prospect pool, a little deeper into some guys here and there to have more than those 12 guys like we had last year. Get closer to the 16 that the Brewers used. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And obviously you don't want guys to get hurt. But again, utilizing the depth appropriately keeps your best pitchers not only healthier, but fresher, which is important when you get to the postseason and pitching becomes ever more important. That's it, gang. That's how you replace an inning eater. You utilize depth. And I think the Orioles have enough of it to utilize this season successfully. So now the next pitcher we're going to talk about is Felix Bautista, the Mountain Report. Everything I'm hearing is great, gang. Bautista threw 2 live BPs in a 5-day period. He faced hitters for the first time 2 Sundays ago, and again last Thursday. It seems like he's, quote, progressing extremely well, as Brandon Hyde said. Quote, we love how the ball is coming out of his hand right now, which is important. We know that velocity is a huge factor in Bautista's game. And coming back from Tommy John, there is no guarantee that he's going to be able to replicate the same level that he was at pre-surgery. Now, frankly, some guys come back throwing even harder. So there's no guarantee he's not going to be able to even improve on those numbers. Frankly, though, even if he's not hitting 101, 102 on the gun, he throws a very heavy ball. Like, that's one of those things that we've been talking about Bautista his entire Orioles career. It's how heavy that ball comes in. And as long as that's still there, he could be down to 97, 98. If that happens, he can still be successful. Now, Brandon Hyde also said, quote, we'll see how it does, but right now he feels great. And that's the main thing. His fastball is ticking up every time out. So I'm not getting reports on what number Bautista is sitting at. But the fact that it's continuing to tick up each time, and it's coming out of his hand really well right now, and they like what they're seeing, again, is all positive. Thank God. Thank goodness. Now, Hyde also talked about how their target for Bautista is at least 7 spring appearances to be ready for the season. Now, that doesn't mean in-game appearances. That means back work, bullpens, or backfield work, bullpens, games, whatever it may be. So these live BP sessions already counted for 2 of them, meaning we have at least 5 more to go. And the thing is, they're being precautious still. They're being cautious. They're truly assessing his recovery after each outing. And they're not going to force him back if he reacts negatively at one point. Like, they're going to understand that, it's not going to necessarily all be linear, and it's not always going to be positive. And if something negative happens, then they're going to assess it. And they're not just going to instantly shut him down or say, beginning of the season's not happening. But they're also not necessarily going to be like, no, gung-ho, he's starting the year on the team. If they need to give him a couple more weeks, they'll give him a couple more weeks. If they think he's ready, he'll be there, gang. There's no reason he won't be. So very exciting to have Felix Bautista back with the team, pitching again, feeling great, looking great, fastball ticking up. Nothing but positive things from the Felix Bautista, the Mountain Report. Now our next topic is one of our new relievers, Andrew Kittredge. We're going to call Kittredge Chase Ridge because that's what he does, gang. He makes these guys chase. He led the MLB last year in chase rate. Now, 200 plate appearances minimum. So certainly that's a decent amount of batters you face, but led the MLB in chase rate, meaning that he's getting batters to swing on pitches out of the zone. Specifically, he got batters to swing on 38.9% of pitches out of the zone. So essentially, 4 of every 10 balls that he throws, not pitches he throws, but balls, when you're talking balls or strikes, 4 of 10 are getting swung at, and guys are chasing. And when guys are chasing balls, odds are that's going to result in either guys missing the ball and whiffing, or light contact, soft contact. And sure, baseball's a funny game that you give up some soft contact and it finds a hole and you get on, and it is what it is. But odds are you're going to have a lot of success when batters are chasing 40% of balls out of the zone. So hopefully Andrew Kittredge can keep that momentum going into this season and match or even improve upon that MLB leading number. Now, why I think he could improve upon it is actually the idea that he doesn't throw as hard as some of these other guys. Certainly he throws hard. He's sitting in the mid-90s, so it's not like he's throwing 80s out there. But compared to most of the guys in our bullpen, which are pushing, if not breaking 100 frequently, having a guy sit in the lower to mid-90s really gets guys off their timing and could be the key to him really succeeding in this bullpen is the fact that he's not throwing as hard as other guys. He's keeping guys off balance. And that's then in turn going to help those other guys that throw harder. Because if you're going from a guy that throws 100 to a guy that now throws 93, you're going to be off time. And then guess what? Next inning, you're facing a guy that throws 103. And now you're not going to be on time. It's a little easier to hit all of these hard-throwing relievers when all you're seeing is that hard fastball. When you're seeing 100 to 102 every time, 98 to 102 every time. You give these MLB's hitters a 5-mile-an-hour window for every pitcher they're going to see, they're probably going to be real timed up with it, even if it's a new reliever. Meanwhile, if you start dipping a little lower and going a little higher, and your starter maybe only throws, let's just say Tomo, you have a starter that throws 90. Okay, well, you get him for 5 innings. Then you're throwing a guy for the 6th inning that throws 10 or 98. Well, then the 7th inning, you throw a guy that throws 101. Well, then the 8th inning, you now throw a guy in Kittredge who throws 93, 94. And then in the 9th, you get to Bautista who throws 102, 103. Again, you're going like this as a hitter. Mentally, it's hard to process those in the moment. So it's exciting. It's exciting stuff. Now, our next topic is going to be how Keegan Akin might be the key lefty in our pen. We talked earlier and previously about how Keegan Akin, Cionel Perez, Gregory Soto, those are probably going to be our 3 big lefties in the pen this season. Well, Keegan Akin's coming off a career year. And I'm hoping that this is now who Keegan Akin has become. Remember, he was a top prospect, gang. Actually a starter back in the day, but certainly has turned reliever over the past few years. And their starting days are done. But again, a top pick, a top prospect, and a guy who has a lot of potential to live up to like he did last season. Last year, he had an ERA of 3.32, 97 Ks, that's 11.1 K an inning, or K per 9, excuse me. 2.2 walks per 9, very good strikeout to walk ratio. Ended up throwing 78 and 2/3 innings. Had a great year, gang. He really did. And frankly, last year he was in the 99th percentile when it came to expected ERA and expected batting average. So his stats could have been even better. He led last year's Orioles bullpen in innings pitched, had 25 appearances in the 7th, 24 appearances in the 8th, and 14 appearances in the 9th. The Orioles utilized him at every point late in that game. So they trust him. Again, he's very, very talented. And maybe I think we're starting to see him just scratch the surface of who he's going to become. It wouldn't shock me that in 10 years we're talking about Keegan Akin still, maybe not for the Orioles, but still being one of these lefty bullpen guys who he's still in the game sort of thing, sort of feel. Now, in his career, he has battled some injuries, but he's mostly pitched well when he's been healthy. It's mainly been those injuries that has kept his career down, and mainly why he became a reliever more than a starter. Overall, I just feel like he's going to wind up being more consistently solid and reliable than Cionel Perez and Gregory Soto. I think Perez and Soto might have maybe a higher ceiling, but they have lower floors as well. We've seen the stints with Cionel Perez where they've gotten a little shaky and a little ugly. Gregory Soto, outside of his first Orioles appearance, really had mostly all good appearances after that point. However, as many of you know, I live right outside of Philadelphia. I watched Gregory Soto for a couple years, and it is very inconsistent at times. You see the potential. You see the good. But then sometimes it gets a little off the rails. Who knows? Maybe, again, the Orioles have found ways to fix those guys in the past and have gotten them a lot more reliable than they used to be. Look no farther than Cionel Perez. When Cionel first got here, he was very inconsistent. Now, he's just slightly inconsistent. I'll take that. But again, I think Keegan Akin is really going to be the key lefty in the pen this year. And hopefully he can stay healthy. And this lefty trio of Akin, Perez, and Soto could be the best in the league. It really could be. When you look around the league, we could be at All-Star break and you could be like, the Orioles have 3 dominating lefties in that pen to go along with guys like Kittredge and Bautista and Cano. And it could be a very, very good bullpen as is currently constructed. I could also see the reality where all 3 lefties especially do not kind of live up to that hype. Do not live up to that expectation or even anywhere near that expectation. And again, is maybe just very inconsistent. And while we have those good moments, might have more inconsistency than we would like and not quite sure what we're going to get from any 3 of them on any given night. And ultimately, that reality would lead to the Orioles making a move at the deadline for a top-line lefty, which is possible. Certainly, though, it's not going to be necessary if these 3 live up to how good they could be. It's very exciting stuff. All right, gang, so we got through all the pitching topics. We covered how many pitchers in this episode. We have to talk some hitters. Obviously, we talked some at the very beginning when we touched on the games, but there's really, 2 hitters, I would say, that we're going to focus primarily on and talk about. And the first one being Ryan O'Hearn. O'Hearn or not? Now, that basically means who is Ryan O'Hearn going to be this season? And what do I see being the future of Ryan O'Hearn with this ball club? And we know Ryan O'Hearn has become a valuable role player for this team the last 2 seasons, playing mostly first base, DH, even helping out in the corner outfield spots at times, especially when we've been injured. So he's really provided that lefty power bat. And what's unique about him is he doesn't strike out to that much, at least compared to other lefty power bats. And probably hits for a better average and more contact than most lefty power bats. Now, when you look at his numbers the past 2 years, it may appear like he took a significant drop last season. But I'm going to tell you why that is not the case. So O'Hearn's OPS actually dropped 40 points from 2023 to 2024. However, his weighted adjusted OPS, his OPS plus, was the same at 122. Now, you might be saying, how does that make sense? Well, simple OPS is on base plus slugging. So you take 2 numbers, you combine them, that is your total. So that is just based off of what you did. OPS plus and these adjusted stats, these weighted stats, the average is 100, okay? And for every percentage point, for every point you go up, it's 1% higher than league average, 2% if you're at 2 points, and onward and so on. And it's weighted against everybody else in the league. Okay? So the league itself had a offensive drought last season. Truly. The league's offense was very poor as a whole last season. And that's why Ryan O'Hearn, his OPS dropping 40 points compared to the rest of the league, was the exact same production. He was still 22 points higher than your average position player when it comes to OPS plus. When we look at weighted runs created, so how many runs did you create weighted against the rest of the league? We actually saw an increase from 2023 to 2024, from 118 to 119. So in many ways, Ryan O'Hearn had just as good of a season as he did in his first year with the Orioles, if not even technically somehow better, despite some worse numbers, as crazy as that might sound. Now, he's mostly a platoon against right-handed pitchers. He doesn't see a ton of lefty-on-lefty action, but it's not necessarily that he's a major liability either. He's a guy that you can leave in, or with injuries and roster constructions or random days, you can have him starting against the lefty. But overall, he's mostly just going to be a righty-on-lefty batter. Now, it's his contract walk year. He's going to be a free agent after this year. And we see time and time again, whether it be Anthony Santander, for us, or many guys around the league, they have their best season in that walk year. So is it possible that Ryan O'Hearn has a monster year, his best year ever, in this walk year? Yeah, absolutely it's possible. And I'm going to tell you why it's not only possible, it's probable. So last year, his expected statistics should have been were much better than his actual statistics. Meaning last year, he had a lot of bad luck and could have had a monster career year last year. And again, that's in a league whose offense was down as a whole, and a guy who's still in his weighted runs created and OPS performed just as good, if not better, than he did the year before, with all of that bad luck. So conceivably, if he performs the exact same this year as he did last year, his numbers are going to take a big jump in every aspect, simply because of how much bad luck he had last year. And that happens, guys. We saw it happen to Ryan Mountcastle a couple years ago, I believe. So I think a major regression seems a lot less likely. Meaning, the idea that Ryan O'Hearn production just falls off completely. And he regresses back to the Ryan O'Hearn that he was with Kansas City. I just think that's so much less likely than his stats either at least staying consistent like it has the past 2 years, if not taking that monster jump and that big time jump. Now, however it plays out for O'Hearn, and I think it will play out really well. I think, again, at the very least, we get the Ryan O'Hearn we've had the past 2 seasons. And there's a good chance maybe he takes that next step. He winds up in the 30s or even 40s with home runs. It's possible. But no matter how it plays out, positive or negative, I truly believe this is the last year for Ryan O'Hearn in Baltimore. And it's one of these things I'm sad to see him go when that time comes, because I do like Ryan O'Hearn. I think he's a really cool part of this team, a really good part of this clubhouse, great guy to have around. Ultimately, though, guys like Heston Kjerstad, guys like Sam Basallo seem destined to fill the hole in the long term for the team. Not only are they better prospects and maybe better players than Ryan O'Hearn. Not only are they both lefty hitters, but they both provide different aspects to the roster and lineup construction potential replacing Ryan O'Hearn. Obviously, they both can DH, but Basallo is naturally a catcher, a very good catcher as well. But he plays first base as well. So while the catcher aspect doesn't affect O'Hearn, him playing first base and DH certainly is kind of where O'Hearn lives. And again, we talked about the flexibility that O'Hearn has shown being able to play the corner outfield. Unfortunately, that's Heston Kjerstad's top position. And Heston's secondary position is also first base. Not only that, but then you have the idea of a guy like Kobe Mayo, who is going to be back in the majors this season for the Orioles, most likely, and certainly moving forward is projected almost as their everyday first baseman. So it all is signaling that the Orioles are not going to need to keep O'Hearn and probably Mountcastle at some point when their contract comes. And that's simply just because of how talented the guys beneath them are. If we were in a different roster construction with prospects to where we didn't really have anybody at that first base, I could propose we might have Mountie and O'Hearn at first base platoon for the next 3 to 5 years. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case, gang. It's just not. And I hope for O'Hearn's sake and our sake, he has his best season ever this year. And he earns himself a big monster contract like Santander got. I hope. I would love it. He's a good guy. He's a great teammate. He's a guy that I hope ends his Orioles career with a World Series championship this year. And you want to talk random guys that could be World Series MVP? Again, maybe not O'Hearn because of the platoon aspect. However, you never know. O'Hearn gets very hot. And again, doesn't really strike out, puts the ball in play, hits for power. I love O'Hearn this season. But I also love the idea of O'Hearn having his best career year and leaving in free agency and the Orioles getting to get that qualifying offer pick for him. I really do. That's what I think the future holds for O'Hearn. But don't be surprised if he has a hugely big monster year this year. Very excited for that. So now what we're going to pretty much end the episode on is how we have 2 Oriole greats in camp as guest coaches. There are a few Oriole greats in camp as guest coaches. The 2 I'm about to mention, you also had Adam Jones, who's a part of the organization now. Nick Markakis was there. You have a few. You have a few, but maybe 2 of the biggest names on that list are Brian Roberts and J.J. Hardy. Now, Hardy, as compared to Roberts, maybe to me, and from what I've heard him talk, seems a little less interested in, again, forcing any knowledge on these guys, lecturing anybody. Doesn't seem like that's what he's trying to do. I heard him talking in an interview about how, when it comes to Gunnar and Jackson, all Westberg, and all these great guys, it's like, what can I offer? Like, what am I going to tell them? They're better than I am. Or at least they're on track to be better than I was. What am I going to say? So he's like, I'm happy to answer any questions they have and impart knowledge, but it seemed like he felt a little standoffish and a little awkward proposing that, going after that, initiating that, if you will. Brian Roberts, on the other hand, I think probably has the opposite vibe from him. Certainly, I feel like personality-wise, he's maybe a little bit opposite of J.J. Hardy, with more of that initiative, like a little more outgoing as far as not afraid to say something, not afraid to see something and point it out. But don't forget, Brian Roberts' dad was a longtime coach at UNC, where Brian went. 20 years Brian Roberts' dad coached at UNC. So he was a top college baseball coach. Brian's been around that his entire life. He understands how to be that coach. It had to have rubbed off on him at some part. And Roberts especially is important when it comes to imparting wisdom on Jackson Holliday. Because just like Jackson, Brian was a long-term shortstop who got turned into a second baseman. Both a little smaller in stature, not tiny, but smaller, however powerful players with similar skill sets between the power, the speed, but really contact all the way. Jackson is not only taking the advice that he's getting, but he's really implementing the advice very quickly. J.J. Hardy talked about how after Brian talked to him about his footwork on double plays at second, he said, quote, "One ground ball later, it looked amazing." To be able to just do it like that quick is awesome. Pretty special. Because it seemed like really, from what I read and what I heard, Brian Roberts was giving some advice to Jackson Holliday on his footwork at second. And literally 30 seconds to a minute later, Jackson had pretty much mastered it and was just doing it automatically. And that's the special player that we have in Jackson Holliday. And that's why I'm still so immensely high on that kid. Not only are they looking at fielding, and I'm sure they're talking hitting as well, but they're analyzing base running and stealing. Roberts had a career-high 50 stolen bases one year, but was always kind of that guy that was a threat on the base paths. Similar to Jackson Holliday, who hasn't really had that much success stealing bases so far in his major league career. I believe he just had 4 last year, and certainly I've seen him get caught stealing a few times, including already in spring training. So it's something, despite the fact that Jackson has that elite speed, seems to be something he can work on and improve upon. So it's great to have him really dig in with guys like Hardy and Brian Roberts and get that advice from these guys that have had those great major league careers and been extremely successful. And I love seeing it. And just like Charlie Morton, just like Tomo, all of these veterans around this team are really going to make a lasting impact on these players. So that's pretty much the episode, gang. One last little point is the Orioles are looking for part-time hot dog racers. So if you want to throw on one of them hot dog suits and run around at least a quarter of the Orioles home games or whatever, a quarter of the races they have, whatever it may be, they are looking for hot dog racers. If I was in the area, maybe I would throw on a suit and give it a try. I am very slow. I am not in the best running shape either. My knees and I got some injuries lingering, so I probably wouldn't make the hot dog squad even if I went out for it. But maybe if I was local, I would have given it a try. Either way, if you're local and you want to throw on a hot dog suit and run around the ballpark a little, Orioles are looking for you. Reach out, check them out. Other than that, gang, I will be back on Thursday. Very excited for what is to come. A lot of great stuff coming for the Orioles, for this show, for me, for you. I'm excited about this season, gang. We are less than a month away from opening day, and I will be at the home opener. So if you're there, make sure you look for me as well. Hopefully, we're going to be at Pickles and around other places in the area before and after the game, meeting fans. So very excited, gang. Thank you for spending some time with me talking Orioles baseball. Before I leave, check out this beautiful little camo Orioles hat. I feel like Gunnar Henderson and the punting boys would approve of it. I love it. I saw it at Lids the other day and said I have to have it. So, gang, with that, we are going to wrap it up. You have a great rest of your Monday, and let's go O's!